Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you woke up and actually felt like yourself? Not running on caffeine, not powering through on willpower, just clear, strong, present. If you had to pause and think about that, this video is for you. Here's a number that stopped me in my tracks early in my career. The average man in this country will die nearly 6 years before the average woman. 6 years, that's not a statistic you can shrug off. That's 6 years of birthdays, grandchildren, mornings with your wife, moments you don't get back. And for the longest time, the explanation everyone reaches for is the same one. Men take more risks. Men are reckless. Men don't go to the doctor. But that's not what I see. My name is Dr. Emily Carter, and in my years of practice, I've learned the real threats to men's health almost never look dramatic. They look normal. They look like Tuesday. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous, because nobody sounds the alarm on something that feels routine. Today, I'm walking you through the 5 habits quietly cutting years off men's lives. And I'll tell you right now, the habit at number 1 is not the one you're expecting. Most people assume this list starts and ends with alcohol. It doesn't. Alcohol is only number 5. Before we get into it, if this resonates with you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and comment where you're tuning in from. I read every one, and I love knowing who's in this community. Let's get started. Coming in at number 5, alcohol. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've heard the lecture. Stick with me, though, because the real danger isn't the drink itself. It's the pattern research consistently links heavy, regular drinking with 2 to 3 years shaved off the average man's lifespan. That number sounds almost survivable. But that's the average across everyone, including the men who have 1 drink a week. For the men who binge 3, 4, 5 drinks in a single sitting after a brutal week, the toll climbs much higher. We're talking a decade or more. Here's what most men never connect. It's rarely the daily habit that does the damage. It's the weekend cycle. Grinding all week, then unloading it all in one heavy night. That pattern is exactly what your liver can't keep up with. Your liver processes roughly 1 standard drink per hour. Push past that, and liver cells start dying faster than your body can replace them. Fat accumulates where it shouldn't. Inflammation spreads quietly in the background. And after 40, I watch this happen constantly in my patients. The liver's ability to recover slows down dramatically. What your body shrugged off at 25 does real damage at 50. I had a patient a few years back, mid-40s, marketing executive, who came in convinced something was seriously wrong with him. Fatigue, brain fog, a stubborn layer of weight around his midsection that wouldn't move no matter what he tried. When we went through his week, honestly, the pattern was obvious. He barely drank Monday through Thursday. Then Friday and Saturday, he let loose. His words, 4 or 5 drinks each night, sometimes more. His blood work showed early liver inflammation, nothing dramatic yet. But it was there, and it was building. We didn't tell him to quit. We just told him to spread it out, slow it down, and give his liver actual recovery windows. 3 months later, his energy was back and his blood work had normalized. Same total amount of alcohol some weeks, completely different pattern, completely different outcome. It doesn't stop there either. Heavy drinking disrupts sleep architecture, spikes blood pressure, suppresses testosterone, and raises baseline anxiety. Most men feel the fallout: foggy mornings, low motivation, a short fuse without ever tracing it back to Friday night. The fix isn't quitting cold turkey, it's building in real recovery, a few alcohol-free days each week, pacing yourself when you do drink, giving your liver a full day to reset after a heavier night, small adjustments, real measurable payoff. But remember, alcohol is only number 5. What's coming next does more damage quietly. Number 4 walks into my office almost every week wearing a disguise: chronic stress, and it outranks alcohol in terms of long-term harm. Multiple long-term studies tracking men under sustained, unrelenting stress point to an average life expectancy reduction of 4 years or more, but that number barely captures what's actually happening internally. When stress stops being an occasional spike and becomes your baseline, the hum underneath everything, cortisol, never fully shuts off. A short burst of cortisol is protective, it sharpens focus, mobilizes energy. Constant cortisol is corrosive. It suppresses immune function, stiffens blood vessels, keeps blood sugar elevated, and quietly wrecks sleep quality, even when you're technically getting your 8 hours. I tell my patients to picture the body like a finely engineered engine. Chronic stress is running that engine with no coolant. Everything keeps moving. But underneath, the parts are grinding themselves down. Here's the deeper problem. Culturally, men are still taught to absorb it. Push through, don't talk about it, be the steady one. So the pressure never gets released, it just accumulates. No outlet, no explosion even. Just a slow erosion nobody notices until something breaks. One thing I've noticed after years of this: the men who handle stress the worst are almost never the ones with the hardest lives. They're the ones who never built in a release valve. I've had patients running companies, managing enormous pressure, who were doing fine because they had a standing Sunday hike, or a weekly call with their brother, or 20 minutes of guitar every night that nobody was allowed to interrupt. And I've had patients with comparatively manageable lives falling apart because they had absolutely nothing carved out that was just for decompression. It's not the size of the stress, it's whether there's anywhere for it to go. The encouraging part, you don't need to overhaul your life to interrupt this. A real walk outside, an honest conversation with someone you trust, an hour spent on something that genuinely brings you joy, no productivity attached. These aren't indulgences, they're maintenance. Give your nervous system permission to come down off high alert, and your body knows exactly what to do with that. That's number 4. What's ahead gets even more serious. Number 3 catches most men completely off guard: social isolation. And what makes it dangerous is how slowly it creeps in. In your 20s, life is full of built-in connection, teammates, roommates, a wide circle. Then your 30s and 40s arrive, career demands more, family takes priority, friendships quietly fade into the background, one missed catch-up at a time. One day, a man in his 50s looks around and realizes his entire support system has narrowed to 1 or 2 people, sometimes fewer. We are not wired to function that way. Human beings need connection the way we need sleep or food. When it disappears, the body registers it as a genuine threat. Large-scale analyses following hundreds of thousands of people have found that chronic isolation raises the risk of early death by a margin comparable to long-term heavy smoking. Unlike a cigarette, isolation leaves no visible trace. There's no diagnosis for loneliness, just a quiet erosion that shows up as measurable biological damage, elevated inflammation, a weakened immune response, blood pressure that's harder to control, and self-care that slips without anyone noticing. I think about a patient in his late 50s, recently divorced, kids grown and out of the house. On paper, he was fine, good job, good health history, no red flags, but he told me something that stuck with me. He said he couldn't remember the last time someone asked him how he was actually doing and waited for the real answer. That's the piece nobody screens for. He wasn't friendless. He had colleagues, a golf group, a full calendar, but none of it was honest. We talked through what it would look like to rebuild even one real connection, and within a few months he'd reconnected with a college friend he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. He told me it was the first time in years he felt like himself around another person. Isolation doesn't necessarily mean living alone. It means having no one who actually knows what you're carrying, no one you're honest with. The good news is the body responds to connection almost immediately. One phone call to someone you've drifted from. One standing Saturday coffee. One group you actually show up for. It doesn't take a complete social overhaul. It just has to be real. Because genuine connection doesn't just lift your mood in the moment, it measurably extends your life. That's number 3. The next 2 matter even more. Number 2 is something I wish more men took seriously because it outranks both stress and isolation, and almost nobody treats it that way: not getting enough sleep. Sleep gets treated like the most negotiable part of the day. One more episode, one more scroll, a couple fewer hours because there's always more to do. Your body disagrees completely. When you consistently shortchange sleep, your organs are forced to keep working through the hours meant for repair. Your resting heart rate climbs, blood vessels stiffen, blood sugar regulation gets harder. Even a single night of 5 hours or less can meaningfully suppress immune function. Research from sleep medicine specialists has linked men who chronically sleep under 6 hours a night to significantly shorter lifespans, often more than 7 years. On average, 7 years from a habit that feels completely harmless in the moment. Here's what makes it sneaky. You adapt to feeling tired. You tell yourself you're just a little sluggish, while underneath your cardiovascular and hormonal systems are working overtime just to keep you upright and functional. I always tell my patients that sleep debt doesn't announce itself the way hunger or thirst does. Nobody feels a sharp, obvious signal that says you're 4 hours behind this week. Instead, it shows up sideways, as irritability, as forgetting things mid-sentence, as reaching for a third coffee just to function at a baseline you used to hit on your own. Men will come in convinced they have a focus problem or a motivation problem, and half the time the actual answer is sitting in their sleep tracker, if they even wear one. But the recovery is fast. After just 2 or 3 nights of real uninterrupted sleep, 7 to 8 hours, blood pressure drops, mental clarity returns, mood stabilizes, energy comes back online. Sleep isn't downtime. It's the window your body uses to pull itself back from the edge. Start tonight. Consistent bedtime, even on weekends, phone down an hour before bed, room cool, dark, quiet, caffeine cut off by early afternoon. None of this is complicated, but it compounds fast. And now, the number 1 habit shortening men's lives: not alcohol, not stress, not even sleep deprivation, it's sitting. just sitting. I know that sounds too simple to take seriously. That's exactly why it's so dangerous. Long-term studies following well over 100,000 people have found that men who sit more than 8 hours a day carry a significantly elevated risk of early death, and a fully sedentary lifestyle can cost up to a decade or more of life expectancy. The damage isn't visible on the surface. It's happening deep inside. When you sit for extended stretches, the largest muscles in your body, your legs, your biggest calorie-burning engines, essentially power down. Blood pools in your lower body, circulation slows, your brain gets less oxygen, which is exactly why long sitting sessions leave you foggy and drained by 3 p.m. Insulin resistance builds quietly in the background, raising your risk for type 2 diabetes. Inflammation climbs. Your heart works harder just to push blood through a stiffened system. Here's the part I really want you to hear. It's not the total hours of sitting that does the most harm. It's how long you sit without moving. After roughly 30 minutes of complete stillness, your metabolism begins to drop. Fat storage accelerates. Muscle tissue starts breaking down faster than it should. Use it or lose it isn't a motivational poster. It's physiology. I had a patient, a software engineer, who was genuinely one of the healthier eating men I've worked with. Clean diet, no alcohol, decent sleep, and yet his blood work kept showing markers that didn't match his lifestyle on paper. It took a while before we honed in on the real culprit. He sat almost 12 hours a day, coding with barely a break. His body was essentially living in a single position from 8 in the morning until he stood up for dinner. Once he started standing every 30 minutes and taking short walking breaks between meetings, his numbers shifted within 2 months. Nothing else in his life changed, just the stillness. But here's the encouraging part. You don't need a gym membership or a new routine to fix this. You just need to interrupt the stillness. Stand up every 30 minutes and move for 2. Walk for 5 minutes after meals. Take calls on your feet. Choose the stairs. Park further away. Let movement weave itself into your day instead of being something you schedule around. The moment you stand up, your body starts recovering. That's not motivation talking. That's biology. When you step back and look at all 5 together, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Men don't lose their health in one dramatic moment. They lose it slowly, in small choices repeated day after day, year after year. Alcohol steals 2 or 3 years. Chronic stress can take 4 or more. Social isolation matches the toll of long-term smoking. Sleep deprivation quietly costs 7 years or more. And sitting, the most invisible habit of all, can cost the most of any of them. What strikes me most after years of watching this play out in real patients is how rarely any one of these habits shows up alone. The man who's stressed usually isn't sleeping well either. The man who isn't sleeping well often reaches for a drink to wind down. The man who's isolated tends to sit more because there's no one pulling him out of the house. These 5 habits feed each other, they form a loop. And that's actually the good news, because it means fixing one tends to loosen the others, improve your sleep, and your stress hormones settle your stress, and you're less likely to reach for that extra drink. Reconnect with one person, and suddenly you have a reason to get up and move. None of these require a complete life overhaul to fix. They require awareness and small, consistent course corrections. That's it. That's the whole secret. If this helped you see something in your own life a little differently, I'd love to hear which one hit closest to home. Drop it in the comments. And if you want more of this, straight talk, real research, no fluff, subscribe and stick around. I'll see you in the next one.